So thank you very much for, first of all, to the library that hosts me today, and it's a pleasure. It's my fourth time in Malmö, all in connection with the with this exhibition that you have now a chance to see. And I asked when there was little less people how many visited the exhibition, so I'll ask once again for my own. How many have already visited the exhibition? Okay, so there's part of you who haven't yet, so you still have a chance, and it's really an important tool that you have in your hands as the community. Really, we spent a long time curating it with our friends at Musealia, trying to make the most comprehensive exhibition that puts the story of Auschwitz in a very wide context. But I'm not going to talk about the exhibition today. I will be talking about the story of Auschwitz and the work of the Auschwitz Memorial, and try to talk about its symbol and its meaning. That's something very important. I'd like to start with the numbers, which are for you very interesting, I hope, and they are also very interesting for us before the pandemics, because of course pandemics changed everything. That's for the 2018, Sweden was in our top 10 countries of visitors at the Auschwitz Memorial. 42,000 people from Sweden visited. And then in 2019 we have Sweden here with again over 40,000. So the Swedish presence among the visitors of the Auschwitz Memorial is always visible. And this is for us very important, and many of the Swedish visitors are students who come here as part of educational programs, which is again very important. And you could also see that there was a Living History Forum report that was published some time ago in 2019 that says that 98% of people in Sweden believe the Holocaust took place. And for most of them, the Shoah means something on a personal level. And when you look at the numbers, 95% of responders aged basically that they agree that knowledge of the Holocaust is important, and to the prevention of something similar happening again. These are high numbers when you compare it to many different places. So it's a good, field for such an exhibition to come to this region, to this country. And I know that there are many, I know that you are ending the summer holidays right now, but I know before there were many young people already visiting the exhibition, and we hope this will continue. But I'd like to start, when we talk about the symbol, from a picture. I don't know, have any one of you ever seen this photograph? So these are young people from a small American town, Bara, Wisconsin. And I always ask people this question: what are they doing? What are these young people doing? Yeah, they're performing Nazi salute, we usually say. What they said after this picture went viral is that they wave at their photographer. But of course, it's difficult to believe that. And the memorial responded to this picture with a statement, of course, that it is very improper to do things like that. And I'll go back to this at the very end. But of course, when we, this is a picture from the part of our education, because in every school system, whether it's Poland, Sweden, United States, they always line us in those lines, your class, your students, with teachers and so on. This is very typical. And you can look at another picture taken many, many years ago. It's another classroom, another group of people, and there is a young student over there. Anyone recognize this young gentleman? It's Adolf Hitler in his school years. We sometimes, when we think about perpetrators, we forget that they were people who went to school. They were people who were age of 11 or 9 or 13, and they have their passions, and then they went through the whole process of education, and their worldview was shaped, and they started having their own ideas about the world, and some ideas are better, and some ideas are worse. And so here is again a very similar photograph of Adolf Hitler. And then the same man many, many years after, as the leader of the state, and this is of course Nazi Germany, he starts educating new generations. And we have another similar type of photograph with Hitler in the center, Hitlerjugend boys in the front. You can see also girls in the back. So this is what he's trying to do. He's trying to poison the minds of people in the nation with this ideology of the Nazi party, anti-Semitism, and all the hatred that that was there. And then, I'm not going to go into historical explanations about the story of Nazi Germany, but this regime was very popular, not only because of terror and concentration camps and all the things like this, but this was, before the war, before the situation changed, it was a fairly popular regime when you look at the polls, the elections, and so on and so on. There was a popularity of this populist totalitarian state that promised to give any Aryan the life that they deserved, and so on and so on. And then the same people, few years after that, are in Auschwitz, and this is the picture of the camp of Birkenau in 1944. You can see Hungarian Jews that are already separated at the platform in Birkenau, the second part of Auschwitz. In the center, you can see people who are getting ready for starting the selection process. And when you look at this gentleman, he needs to finish smoking his cigarette because the sorting here hasn't finished, so they're not ready yet. So it didn't take a long time from 1933, when they get power in Germany, when Nazi Party gets power in Germany, to 1944, when extermination is in its peak moment at Auschwitz. And this is the site today. The Auschwitz Memorial that is supposed to preserve the site, but also educate about the story and commemorate the victims of the camp. And before we talk about different things about the memorial, a very short and brief historical development of Auschwitz in 3 minutes. Because again, it is very challenging, because when we talk about symbols, if you ask people all around the world what Auschwitz means, they will basically say Auschwitz is the symbol of the Holocaust. Jews were murdered in gas chambers, and they will be right. Approximately 1 million Jews were murdered in Auschwitz during its story. But the story of Auschwitz is much more complicated, and I'll try to explain it. But also the story of the Holocaust as the historical event is much more complicated than the story of one camp. This is the challenge of symbols. In many cases we know about the symbol, but we do not know much about the facts that are linked with the symbol. And I think for the world and the Second World War, there are only two places, two locations that are worldwide recognized as a symbol. One is Auschwitz, and the second one is Hiroshima. I don't think that maybe you have another idea and you have some other name and place that may be linked, but sometimes people say D-Day and the beaches of Normandy. It's mainly for the Western world. Stalingrad, mainly for the Eastern campaign. Pearl Harbor, the situation in the United States, but something which will be globally is Auschwitz and Hiroshima. But again, knowing facts about Auschwitz or knowing all the development of the atomic bomb and the situation there is not so easy. So of course, Auschwitz is a symbol of the Holocaust, but the story of Auschwitz starts without Jews as a target at that point yet in Nazi Germany. This is the first transport of prisoners to Auschwitz on June 14, 1940. 728 Poles are deported there, and this is the beginning of the story of Auschwitz, which was created by Nazi Germany as a camp to target Polish resistance, intellectuals, people who could be a threat to the new regime. Poland was occupied by Nazi Germany, and it was divided into two parts. Part of Poland was annexed, part of Poland was turned into a colony, and they tried to destroy the nation because the nation is an obstacle to their rule. And this is the first idea for Auschwitz, that they needed a place for arresting, for isolating all those people. And here you can see, for example, a document which is the first plan for the Auschwitz camp, which finally became this area. These are former army barracks that the Germans took over to very quickly build a camp, because they have a very urgent task to arrest, to put all these arrested people that they had. And the camp starts slowly growing, with a number of Polish prisoners growing. What is very interesting is that Auschwitz was the first concentration camp in Nazi Germany that is planned together with a functioning crematorium, which means that the SS that operates the camp, that plans the camp, they knew that the conditions that they are creating, because of the context of the occupation, will lead to huge mortality. And in fact, the mortality in the first 6 months of Auschwitz was 25%. And there are two groups in this initial period that are harassed the most. They are the Jews and the priests. The Jews are there because among Polish advocates, lawyers, teachers, and other intellectuals, there were Jewish people, and they were arrested and they were brought to Auschwitz together with other non-Jewish people. And from the very beginning, the anti-Semitic ideology is present, and they are treated worse. Then in 1941, the camp expands territorially. I mean, the camp created something that was called Interessengebiet, the zone of interest. The Auschwitz concentration camp is here, and this is 40 square kilometers of territory. Auschwitz planned to do farming, to do experimental ideological farming for the future colonization of the Eastern Europe. And there are farms created there, even Agora rabbits were there, or many different animals or crops. And the prisoners are working in many of those farm subcamps. But another player comes at this stage in 1941, and this is one of the biggest chemical corporations in the world. It was called IG Farben Industry, IG Farben. And IG Farben in late 1940, early 1941, started planning to build a new factory of synthetic rubber, which was a very important raw material for the army production. And because they want to avoid the British bombardments, they wanted to move eastwards. And they chose a location 6 kilometers from the concentration camp at the area of Silesia, because they have coal at their disposal for the production of the rubber. And at some point they started looking at the Auschwitz concentration camp as the source of laborers. 10,000 prisoners were supposed to be sent by Auschwitz to build the factory. And they didn't have enough Poles to arrest at that time because of many different issues in the occupied context. And the Auschwitz camp was told, no worry, because we attacked the Soviet Union. And first of all, when we talk about this period, this is the beginning of extermination of Jews, because in summer of 1941, Nazi Germany made a decision of the physical extermination of Jewish people, but also German army captured millions of Soviet soldiers. And they just fenced them and left them to starve. And the concentration camp was told, we can send you Soviet soldiers and they can work. Your problem will be solved. You'll have people to do all the work there. And Auschwitz was told about it, and they didn't have enough space in this original camp because it was relatively small, and the numbers they were talking about were 50,000, 100,000, 150,000 Soviet soldiers. So this is why they decided to build a second camp at first planned for those Soviet soldiers, and they chose one of the villages that they had taken over during this farm expansion, and the name of the village is Birkenau in German. It comes from the birch trees around there, and this is the first plan of Birkenau, like a very primitive camp, many barracks, very little number of latrines or any sanitation installations, a large number of morgues, or actually holes where they were supposed to put corpses of people. Because again, they anticipated that the mortality rate will be high. And if anyone knows the layout of Birkenau, you will notice missing parts. There's nothing there yet. And later they built their gas chambers and the crematoria. And with the transport of Soviet soldiers, the camp was given another order. They were told, among those Soviet soldiers there will be officers of the army, there will be political officers, there will be members of the Communist Party, there will be partisans. They all must be killed, must be liquidated. And it was a big operation, killing sometimes hundreds of people at the same time. And the camp that used shooting before, the SS there had a kind of a problem. They said, maybe we can find some better, more efficient way of killing them. And in September of 1941, in this basement, in the camp prison in Block 11, they tested pesticide called Cyclone B and checked if they can use it to kill people. And they killed 850 people, 600 Soviet soldiers, 250 Polish prisoners from the hospital, and they learned that this pesticide will work, will do the job, will kill people, and they created a small gas chamber in the morgue right next to the crematorium. So the camp developed a tool for extermination of people. At some point, the transport of Soviet soldiers stopped, and the camp again had a problem because they didn't have those transport that will solve their logistical plans to be slave labor for the camp for the IG Farben. And this is already after January of 1942 and the coordination of not only the extermination plans but also deportation of Jews from Western Europe. And Auschwitz was told, again, we will send Jews your way. We can transport any number of Jews that can work, and your problem is solved. And from March of 1942, we can see different kind of transport coming towards Auschwitz. Transport of Jewish people, huge transport of Jews that are sent there because they were Jewish. But the first few of those transports from Slovakia, from France, were people who were chosen to become prisoners. Fairly young women and men. This is the period when first women enter Auschwitz. After a few weeks, however, the situation changed. And the SS at Auschwitz noticed that among the transport of Jews, they see children, they see older people, they see families, and those people in their eyes were useless. And then the question was, what shall we do with them? We do not have any job for them. They cannot do any job, and we do not have food for them and place for them. And the tool was right there. The tool was they have gas chambers. And from late spring of 1942, and finally from July 1942, it became a permanent process in Auschwitz. All transport of Jews that are deported are selected. They went through the process of selection, and you saw the picture of the selection before. So SS doctors made a choice. Some people will become prisoners. However, most, we think it's usually about 75–80% of each Jewish transport, will be killed in gas chambers. And here is a plan of Birkenau with this part. When you look at this plan before, you have this big camp here, but you have gas chambers and crematoria here, gas chambers and crematoria here, another gas chamber located in the forest. So it became a place of mass extermination of Jews. And 90% of the victims of Auschwitz were Jewish people. And most of the Jewish people never entered into the concentration camp. They were murdered immediately in gas chambers after the selection process. And in the exhibition at Malmö Messe, you can see, for example, this room, which is full of symbols and objects related to the extermination. You can see a gas mask and a Cyclone B canister. You can see the model of the door to a gas chamber. You can see, and this is one of the most moving objects in the exhibition, a child's shoe with a sock. And again, when you think about parents and children and how parents talk to them, I mean, put the socks inside the shoes because otherwise, they'll all get messy and things like that. And maybe these are the last words, or one of the last words, one of the last things that this child did, putting those socks into this little shoe, and it survived. You can see also drawings made by a survivor, a Polish-French-Jewish survivor from the Sonderkommando, David Aller, who was a talented artist, and he survived the hell of the Sonderkommando, which was the group of prisoners who were forced to work inside the gas chambers and the crematoria, and he drew the tragedy, the horror of this place. So you can all see that in the exhibition. So of course, when we talk about Auschwitz, we have and again, this is the platform, the selection platform. Majority of the victims were Jews, but we have many different memories. I mentioned Poles, I mentioned Soviet soldiers. We also have Sinti and Roma, another group of people that was targeted by the Nazi regime, and approximately 23,000 Sinti and Roma people were deported to Auschwitz. Most of them were murdered. And we talk about 1.3 million people, and we talk about 1.3 million human stories. And for example, here is one story. Anyone recognize the team that is here? Those shirts have red color. Maybe that helps. But this is Ajax Amsterdam. I mean, some people are familiar. So this is Ajax Amsterdam before the war. And this gentleman here, his name was Eddie Hamel, who was born in New York City. He was an American Jew with Dutch descent. His family had emigrated from the Netherlands. He later went to the Netherlands. He started playing for Ajax, and he became the first Jewish and the first American player of the team. He was a defender. He played in 128 league games. He scored 8 goals, or 125 league games, I think. And he got married. He had children. He became a coach finally. And when the Netherlands were occupied by Germany, and they started deporting Jews for extermination for the Nazi ideology, in the eyes of the Nazis, he was a Jew. Not a Dutch, not an American, not a soccer player, football player, but he was a Jew, and he was deported with his wife and children, all of them. The wife and children were murdered immediately. He survived as a prisoner for a few months, and he died. You'll find other stories, and this is a very interesting connection with the local context. Here is a lady, a Polish woman, Halina Bańko, who was born in the city of Oświęcim, the city where the Germans created the Auschwitz concentration camp. And you can see that she was later transferred to Ravensbrück, and she was liberated there. And she survived Ravensbrück thanks to the Swedish Red Cross evacuation, the project of Count Folke Bernadotte. And after recovery in Sweden, she came back to Poland. But you know better than myself that many of the Holocaust survivors who live in Sweden are here thanks to this operation, and they decided to to find their roots in this new land when they were saved by the white buses story. So there are many, many individual stories we can also tell. And this is the Auschwitz Memorial in its meaning. It's important for so many different groups of people, for different religions, and here you can see different visits of different religious denominations. You can see also many politicians visiting this place, and you can see the Pope, you can see the judges of one of the international tribunals. Over there, I chose the picture. I hope you recognize the man in the picture. It was a former Prime Minister of Sweden. And so these people are coming on a daily basis for different reasons to see this place, because Auschwitz is important. But it wouldn't happen. We wouldn't be sitting here today in Malmö. We wouldn't have the exhibition without the decision of survivors after the liberation, after the war, to turn the place of the former camp into the memorial. We could say they had every right to say we should destroy this place. We suffered there, we lost our, everyone there. This is so evil that it should be plowed. But the survivors decided to start covering the documents that the SS scattered in the streets while trying to burn all of them. They started creating the archives, the collection, and finally, in summer of 1947, the State Museum was created at the site of the former camp with some sort of a compromise, because today the site covers two parts of the Auschwitz complex. Auschwitz complex was 3 main camps and 50 sub-camps. The whole Interessengebiet, the whole zone of interest, is 40 square kilometers. But today the memorial has Auschwitz one side with this infamous Arbeitmacht-Freigate, and you can see the barracks of the camp behind, and Birkenau camp 3 kilometers away, which became the largest part of the Auschwitz complex. Here is the photograph of the Auschwitz one part and the camp of Birkenau with the gate over here, the selection platform, the ruins of gas chambers and the crematoria in the forest, the remains of the barracks and some of the barracks standing. So this is the space that became a commemorated place and the memorial. And when we talk about the mission of the Auschwitz Memorial today, we have several different, and I'm going to talk only about few of them. I think one of the most challenging one is conservation of all the authentic remains that left, whether it's a toothbrush, whether it's a suitcase, whether it's a building, whether it's a ruin. Our mission is to preserve as long as possible everything that remained, because this is also a testimony to the story that happened there, to the human tragedy that happened there. So here you can see one of the wooden barracks in conservation. We have approximately 8,000 kilograms of melted metal items, because the storage areas where the SS, the Germans, plundered and sorted the property of the victims were set on fire, and many of these metal objects were melted like this. And there are people among our staff that come to work every day, and their work for 8 hours a day is to try to separate these metal items from this melted heaps. And when you go through the exhibition here in Malmö, at the very end, at the liberation part, you can see this display case with some of these metal items. These are the ruins of one of the gas chambers. This is the undressing space where people undressed before they were murdered. And because the remains are underground, the undressing space, some of the undressing spaces were underground, the conservators built here a wall which is outside of the original structure, but you can see that it is connected with those anchors that holds the wall to prevent it from collapsing, because the earth constantly put pressure. So we try to save everything, whether it's a horrifying object of an artificial limb, and when we think of the fate of people with any physical disabilities entering Auschwitz, they had no chance of survival. Or when we talk about the musical scores of the camp's orchestra. We have all those objects and documents, and we try to preserve this. And we have one of the most modern conservation laboratories in the world that was created almost 30 years ago, thanks to international help, thanks to Ronald Lauder Foundation and many philanthropists and many people of goodwill all around the world. Auschwitz Memorial received a tool that allows us to save those objects. And conservation today also helps us to find new tiny bits of the story of people who became prisoners of Auschwitz. Here you have a suitcase. And this is a suitcase like We have 4.6 thousand of them. For a conservator, a suitcase is a nightmare because it is made of different materials. You have metal, you have leather, you have again either paper or cardboard or leather or some plastics or wood or any other material, and every combination of material is difficult. And in this particular suitcase, they found a piece of paper. It's like a trash. I mean, you could just take it out and throw it away, but not according to our philosophy. So it was taken out, and it's a piece of a newspaper. It's in Polish. It's from 1937 from the city of Lwów, which then was Poland, today is Ukraine. And it was a Jewish paper published in Polish in Lwów. And someone put it as this little paper ball and stuffed the suitcase. And today, this suitcase is stored together with this little fragment of a human history, and they together constitute an object. And these are the super storage facilities that we produced for the suitcases especially. And we have many types of storage areas for different materials. We have different laboratory equipment that allows us to analyze different materials that we have. Because, for example, no one in the world knows yet how to conserve early 20th century plastics. And for example, we have many plastic toothbrushes, and no one really knows how to save them. That's a big research challenge that we have. Here you can see one of the biggest conservation projects that we're doing, because we also save buildings. And we have a huge project of the conservation of brick barracks. And during such conservation project, we are allowed, because we usually do not dig through the site of the former camp to search for anything. But during the conservation projects, we have to analyze the structure outside, and then we find things. And during conservation of 2 brick barracks, and we have 45 brick structures that we need to attend to, we found over 5,000 items. 5,000 little pieces of human life and human story, and this is how they look before the conservators can look at them. And then during the work of the conservation, we save those tiny pieces and human stories. Sometimes here you can see, a ring made probably in the camp from a piece of wire. But we also can find some camp numbers on individual items, and then through research we can link it with an individual person. So thanks to conservation, we not only save physical remains of the camp, but also learn new tiny bits of the human story. And here is the announcement made by Sweden, because of course the question is how to finance such a huge conservation programs. And for this reason, several years ago, an Auschwitz-Birkenau Foundation was established in 2009, and the foundation goal is to create an endowment fund, which is now estimated to 180 million euro, and there are 40 states and many philanthropists and donors that help us in this goal, and Sweden is one of the countries that help us to reach this goal. And here you can see here in Malmö at the Holocaust Forum that was organized here, the government of Sweden announced that they will add more funds to the endowment, which was a very incredible decision, also in the time of the pandemics, that people had different things in their minds. And here the preservation is so important because, as Anne-Linda said, we can build a future from learning, reflecting, and remembering the terrible past. And this is what we try to do as the conservation. But of course, we cannot do learning, reflecting, and remembering without education. And that's another part of our mission. And in most cases, the education is the guiding of people at the memorial. If anyone visited the memorial, most of our visitors go with a guided tour. We guide right now in 20 languages, including Swedish. And here you can see the numbers of visitors from 2001, when we had around 500,000 people, to the record number of 2019, where over 40,000 people from Sweden visited. And here we have the time of COVID. So Auschwitz becomes a symbol, and this is also a very interesting graph that shows us that people come to this one single place to see the Auschwitz Memorial because they think it will help them to understand the much more global story, which is very problematic and challenging, but we have to deal with those numbers, and now we are recovering after the pandemics. We don't know yet the number of 2022. If we get to 800, 900,000 visitors, probably it will be a good result for us. So having an empty picture of Birkenau like that in the middle of the day was impossible usually. But in the pandemics we were closed for over 200 days, and that was for us very painful moments, because the institution was created by survivors to tell the story to people who visit. Education is also many different programs that we have aside of guiding, which could be youth seminars, which can be 1 day, 2 days, it can be 2 weeks. We are ready to accommodate everyone depending how long time they have. We have meetings with survivors. We have lectures for teachers, for different professional groups. We also have a very interesting educational program for the prison system, for the penal system. We work with the staff of Polish prisons, but also sometimes we are able to work with people who are prisoners today, who did something wrong and made some bad choices in their lives, and we try to come with this education to their institutions. Sometimes they visit the memorial, and this is in fact a very challenging educational program. Another part of our education, we do it through exhibition. This is the main exhibition. Those of you who visited the Auschwitz Memorial may remember some of those images. And this exhibition was created by survivors in 1955. And there are already some things we want to change in the exhibition, but there is one element that the survivors really didn't want to talk about in 1955. And right now, while doing one of the biggest projects that we're doing right now is the updating of the main exhibition, and in 8 years it will be completed, but one part that we are going to add will be the part about Auschwitz as an institution, the Auschwitz camp as an institution, and the perpetrators. Because the human question we ask when we come to the place like Auschwitz is, how was it humanly possible that people built a place like that, that people created ideology like this that led to the suffering of so many people? What were the motivations of those regular people that they decided to join this organization and that they worked in a place like this? And you know, when we think that the third commandant of Auschwitz, Richard Baer, who was the commandant during the largest killing operation in the story of Auschwitz, the murdering of the Hungarian Jews, was a confectioner maker out of profession. He learned to make candies for kids, and then he was responsible for murdering of tens of thousands, of hundreds of thousands of young people in the camp. This is something that really raises questions. I'll go back to this. And here and of course, we work at the memorial. We have 2.3 million visitors a year. But we also need to think about it, if we have 2.3 million people visiting the Auschwitz Memorial every year, it means we do not have billions of people, 7-8 billion of people who do not come to the memorial. And what should we do with them? How can we give them something if they will never be able to come? Auschwitz Memorial in its story has been visited by approximately a little bit over 50 million people. That's really not a huge number when we think about how many generations went through this time. And one of the answers to this question is the exhibition that we created together with Musealia. That a traveling exhibition about Auschwitz, coming to different places, may give people an opportunity to see to meet the authenticity that we managed to create, because we gave a lot of the objects on loan for this exhibition, and this exhibition has plenty of educational content around the story of Auschwitz, which explains the site, explains the story of the town, explains the ideology that led to it, shows what was the Holocaust, what were the atrocities during the Second World War, and many, many more. And one of the good problems that the exhibition faces, it faced it in Madrid, it faced it in New York City, in Kansas City, and I also know they face it here in Malmö, is that some people stay too long. That they have a problem because they come and they want to stay too long and they need to close the exhibition, and people want to learn the story because it is a captivating and very interesting, the story is told in a very interesting way. And what you can see, for example, this is the picture from the Malmö exhibition. You can see this desk, and you can actually stand at the desk of the commandant of Auschwitz, Rudolf Hess, which this object is not presented at the Auschwitz Memorial. Many of the objects that you can see here are not presented to public at the memorial. This is the desk that we have. And another way we try to interact with the world and give people the possibility to learn this story is, of course, thanks to internet and social media. I may ask, we are on Facebook, on Twitter and Instagram. How many of you follow any of the social media accounts of the Auschwitz Memorial? I see 4 hands. So again, more homework for you to do. And you can follow us. There you have the addresses. And this is already a large community. These numbers I updated this morning. So as you can see, we're getting close to 2 million people all around the world who every day get a little bit of the story. And I'm not going to go and talk about the social media, but one thing, if you follow us on Twitter, you can see something like this. Every 2 hours, you will get a tweet with a name on the birthday of these people from 1 a.m. to 11 p.m. And they also show the complexity of the memories and the stories of Auschwitz, because you'll find men, women, children, Jews, non-Jews, Gypsies, Soviets. Sometimes there are no pictures. So we try to show this complexity through those tiny individual human stories every single day. And the world of the social media is really, it's a story within itself, and I could talk about it for a long time because I run our social media. And 2 years ago, we tried to get to, at first we thought 750,000 followers for the 75th anniversary of the liberation. Later we managed to get to 1 million followers on Twitter, and there were people helping us. And I remember one day, one evening, I was sitting at home and my phone started buzzing. I mean, there are lots of notifications on my phone, and I said, what's happening? New followers coming. What is happening? And I started getting to the bottom of it. What was the reason that sparked this interest? And I found this tweet. And I don't know how many of you are a Star Wars fan. I am not. And now it is on the record. But I really didn't know at first who this person is. And I have to Google Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker. We didn't ask him to do anything. And he decided to write this, that for him, the Auschwitz Museum is the most important account I've ever followed. And then thousands of people followed, and we really built this virtual community that matters, that can bring the story of Auschwitz to so many different places in the world. And sometimes the social media outreach and the reaction of people are really, really amazing. And what you can see, Auschwitz is the World Heritage Site at UNESCO. 27th of January, which is the liberation date of Auschwitz, is in many countries the Holocaust Remembrance Day. The anniversary of liberation is the day for the memorial, where we have the most important event in the year, commemorative event, when we have survivors, we often have politicians. And for the 70th anniversary of liberation, we had representatives of 50 states, so 50 state delegations on the level of King, President, Prime Minister came to be there and to listen to survivors. And some people say that this was the largest summit of heads of states in the history of Poland since Middle Ages. And people came to this place because of its value and its symbol and its meaning for the world. So, and we really put the politicians on chairs, and they had to listen to the words of survivors, what they want to tell them. If you want to see how it looked like, it's all recorded. You can find it on our YouTube. Both the 70th and the 75th anniversary were very big events, and I really recommend listening to the words of survivors then. And the last thing I want to talk about is, what is the meaning of the story? What is the challenge of our education? Why do we do this? Why we teach people all these facts, and what we want people to take away from this? And this is something very challenging because, and the first challenge is that, yes, when we come to the place like Auschwitz Memorial, when we go through the site of the exhibition that you can see now in Malmö, our mind works like this, that we look at the victims. This is natural, this is empathy, this is compassion. We literally feel that we want to be among them, to give them comfort, to cry because of their fate. And this is something which is very important, because thanks to this we rehumanize the victims. Victims that were supposed to be dehumanized by the perpetrators. And by giving their names back, by talking about them, we try to reverse this process. But there's another challenge, because sometimes while doing this, we try to dehumanize the perpetrators, calling them monsters, devils, horrible, Dr. Mengele, the angel of death. And we set a trap on ourselves, because if we ask the question, how can people choose to do something like this, choose to wear such uniform, choose to join this organization, how regular people become mass murderers, we cannot dehumanize the perpetrators. We need to remember that they were people just like us. They had families, they had children, they had dogs, they listened to music, they had life problems like everyone else. The eldest son of the camp commandant was kicked out of several schools because he had problems with learning, and the family had to deal with that. And at the same time, the father is running the largest extermination camp in Nazi Germany. This picture is very interesting. This is the picture that was made 30 kilometers from Auschwitz at the SS resort. The SS made, as a good employee, they made a resort for their staff, that they could go to a nice hill overlooking a lake. There was a place where they could have some food, beer, and so on, and they could go there for weekends. And when you look at this scene, there is a man playing accordion, and we have the commandant of Auschwitz at that time, Richard Baer, the creator of Auschwitz, Rudolf Hess, the first commandant. At that time he was the head of the SS garrison. You have the adjutant of the commandant, who is actually the owner of the album. You have Dr. Josef Mengele, you have Musfeld, who was the head of the crematoria, and many, many others. So this is the high-ranking people, and you have many other people in the back. And the new research says, there's Tal Brutman, a French historian, saying that this event was organized by the Auschwitz concentration camp after the completion of the Hungarian Jewish operation, where during 56 days, 420,000 Hungarian Jews were processed through the Auschwitz system, and about 330,000 of them were murdered immediately in gas chambers. And this project was finished, and the camp throws a party to celebrate that they completed the project. It's like a very corporate thing to do. And so some of these people in the back are people who put Zyklon B into the gas chambers. Some of them are drivers who drove the victims and drove their property. And this group of people was responsible for murdering of so many, 330,000 people in 56 days. It means 6,000 people every single day. And they are celebrating this as something that they achieved. Or here is a man responsible for shooting of many people at the execution wall, Gerhard Palic, who has a dog and has a daughter, and he was a father. And these are perpetrators. And we really have to remember about this to learn this story. And there's another challenge. Because we look at those pictures, aerial photographs taken by Allied reconnaissance squadrons. Actually, they were taken by South Africans. It's a very interesting story of the units of air reconnaissance over there. And for the record, it's important to remember that this picture were not published during the war. They were really not known during the war. They were found in the CIA archives in a long time after the war, and they were researched. But as people today, when they look at the pictures, when they come to the Auschwitz Memorial, they ask this question: did the world know? And the world did know about this. And then the follow-up question is, why didn't they do more? Why didn't they direct more? They help more people, they save more people. And this, of course, has many different kinds of answers. I sense that sometimes people ask this question with a little bit of blame, saying, 80 years ago people didn't stand up to the task. We are better than this. And here I put a huge question marks. Are we really better than this? Because as we can look at the pictures from 1940s, we can also look at other pictures. This is Srebrenica genocide, only in 1995, where we could observe a horrible tragedy of people there. Today, we can look at the concentration camps or many different institutions of that kind in different places in the world where people are re-educated, where people are persecuted, where people are dehumanized, and we are watching it. Today, thanks to the satellite technology, we can actually see mass graves before they become mass graves, and later we can see the results. And so we are witnesses, and we live, and we are now in this very difficult time, the difficult time that the Auschwitz Memorial, we really had a big discussion whether we should make a statement on the situation. But as you can see, on February 24th, we decided to say something about the Russian attack on Ukraine. And this is the statement of the Auschwitz Memorial. Because the more we think about it, the more we understand that telling the story of Auschwitz without looking at today is then irrelevant. If we only put this history into dates and numbers and history books, then we'll not learn anything. Because we deeply believe, and we are adapting it to our educational strategy and philosophy, that the history and human tragedy of Auschwitz should be a mirror for all of us to look at our moral responsibility today. Because, people come and see this place, and we also think that this place should make people uncomfortable, because sometimes I feel that people come to, put a flower, a stone, to say a prayer, to shed a tear, and then they leave, and then they continue with their lives. And we really want to shake them, to make them uncomfortable, because again, it's very natural that we look at the victims. It's very natural we do not really want to look at the perpetrators, but there is another perspective that we need to remember. Because probably none of us will ever become a victim. And I do hope none of us will ever become a victim. And I really think that none of us also will become a perpetrator. But we are all bystanders. We are all bystanders of different things happening today in our cities, in our schools, in our countries, in the world. And today we really have access to information. So in a way we share the perspective of this girl in Nazi Germany, when it's not her problem, she's witnessing some kind of persecution, but it is not her problem. And I think we need to learn this story to realize that things that we see are our problem, and we should find motivation to react. With the story of Auschwitz, we have the story of people of goodwill, people who lived outside of the Auschwitz isolated zone, but they found motivation in their life to do something, to smuggle food, medicaments, help in escapes, helping people in different way. And this is a very important part of that story, that normal people, again, as bystanders, then they can see that there is a challenge and they can make a difference. And again, with the story of Sweden and the story of Denmark and the story of Sea here, you have those three important events. First of all, Raoul Wallenberg and his rescue in Hungary, and a diplomat trying to save the Jews. We have the rescue of the Danish Jews, and 98% of Danish Jews survived because of this operation of crossing Sund. And we have Folke Bernadotte and the white buses and the attempt at first to rescue Scandinavian prisoners, but then they tried to put into the white buses everyone they could, because that was a very important message. So you also have a story to look up to, because it's a very important part of this local history of Malmö, of Copenhagen, of Denmark, and it's also presented in the exhibition at Malmö Messen. And going to the end, after this picture went viral and the museum made a statement, we started thinking ourselves whether it is enough. And we decided that it's not enough. And we sent to Baraboo, Wisconsin, a small exhibition about the history of Auschwitz, which was presented in their school, which was presented in the city hall. And we also sent books to the school and to give teachers there a tool to deal with something that happened there, something that was problematic, something stupid that these boys did because they didn't understand the power of this symbol of hatred. But what was very moving for us is that just days after this picture went viral, the same stairs, the same place, different people from this community decided to say that they disagree, that there's another set of values that they believe, and they decided to come there and show it. So this is, in a kind of a very round way, the story of why the Auschwitz is important, but also how we should search the meaning in this tragedy. And just to give you something, if you want to learn more about the story of Auschwitz, we have plenty of possibilities. First of all, you can follow our social media, so Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. But if you want to learn about different aspects of the story of Auschwitz, we have online lessons. And this is the address lesson.auschwitz.org, where you can find all in English, sometimes in other languages, around 30 lessons. Each of them, you can only see few of the topics, but some of them are very general, some of them are very detailed about escapes or about the evacuation, the creation of the museum, the female perpetrators, male perpetrators, and so on. So highly recommended. We have an online magazine about memory all around the world, Memoria, and it's also in English, so memoria.auschwitz.org. And we also have a podcast. And in the podcast, our historians talk about different things related to the history of Auschwitz in a more lengthy way, describing different processes It is, again, everything is in English, so auschwitz.org/podcast. You can find it on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and all the major platforms. On Auschwitz is the address. And with this, I'm finishing this presentation. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention, and thank you for coming here, and thank you for listening. And I was told that we are a little bit limited with time because the library needs to close, but there is time, and if there are any questions that you want to ask, I'm here and I'm available, and I saw you trying to raise your hand and ask a question. So, but just wait for the microphone, please.
The last picture, the women and the children in the outside the gas chambers.
Yep.
This one, because this, when I was in Auschwitz, it was photographed on the trees of this kind of picture, because you can see these people, you're standing in the same ground as they did, and that was a really, it's blown out. Really, it's a very important photo.
So this is a very important photo when we realize that these people are really standing 150 meters from a gas chamber and they do not know anything about their faith.
Yes.
And we can see this location today. And this is why, in a certain way, the exhibition that we have, it's great, but it will not replace coming to visit the memorial. Because the visit at the memorial is, of course, a lesson of history, and you have a guided tour, and the guide for 3 hours, 5 hours tells you different facts. But of course, our brain and our attention is limited, and I usually tell to the visitors I guide that, ladies and gentlemen, if I meet you tomorrow, and I'll ask you to take out a piece of paper, and I'll ask you 10 questions about details, you will not do as good as you think you will. But I tell them, but what you felt today will remain with you forever. If in 20 years you'll be watching a documentary about an Auschwitz survivor, something from the visit that you experienced today will come back. Whether it will be a smell, a view, an emotion that you had in the emotional memory, it's already there. And this is the kind of the value of coming to visit to the site. But this is why we really decided to put on loan many objects in this exhibition, so that people have access to those tiny bits. They could look at jewelry pieces, or the desk of the commandant, or the bed where prisoners slept, or many other objects to kind of get them closer to this authenticity. So we try to build this experience, and something that we are planning to launch this year, which might be interesting for you here, is that we are going to launch a project of live guided tours online. So there will be educators like myself, or we have 350 of them working, and they will connect with people through a special app live. The educator will be at the site of the memorial, guiding people through the area and show them live what they see and what they can see there. And people will be able to ask questions, and they'll be able to be in Sweden, in Australia, in wherever. I mean, the time difference may be challenging for some parts of the world, because at some point it gets dark in Poland and at the memorial, so Australia may have a problem. But this is kind of a post-pandemic thinking, that today the technology is already good enough. We can have stable internet connection, and people can have enough not to make it problematic with all this, the picture stacks and things. We are sure that, technologically speaking, we are able to give people the possibility to, again, it will not replace the visit, but it will get people closer to the authenticity of the site.
I overheard that you have been working in Auschwitz for 15 years. Is that right?
On October 1st, it will be exactly 15 years.
Okay, good. I was wondering, what do you feel when you get coming to work? Is it both? I imagine there are mixed feelings of both sorrow and a bit hope, because, a lot of people are still interested in Auschwitz.
This is, of course, a very challenging question, because we somehow need to get used to it. Our staff entrance to when I go to my office is right at the first gas chamber in the crematorium of the camp. And you can imagine if every morning I would stop there and think about this place, it would be impossible to work. So you have to somehow get used to it, because then I go into my office, I put the coffee machine on, and then I switch on my computer, and I work in the former SS pharmacy. So I work in a historical building. We do not have the comfort of some of our colleagues working in different Holocaust museums, that they have a modern building and they have an exhibition, but they have the space. We work at the actual site of the former camp. And there is also a different feeling when I work, because then I'm in the mode of, I guide people, I write things for social media, I give lectures. So then I need to stay professional. And we could discuss a lot about the role of emotions in education, and there are many challenges, because it's so easy to play with emotions or to misuse the emotions in this education. But when we talk about the groups that are coming, really I can tell you that it's very easy to make people cry. With the Auschwitz, with telling the right stories, it's very difficult to get people back, to listen, to find. So we always have to find this balance. But this is what I do when I work. But I also learn. I go to these places, I read new books, I meet survivors, I listen to their stories. I try to be a better educator, a better guide, a better worker, a better staff of the memorial. And then I get close to these stories. I sometimes need to take pictures for the website, and I remember holding some of these items in my hands. And I'm alone in a photographic studio, just centimeters from these objects. And then it really hits. There are moments when this work is very difficult. I remember a group of pathologists, so the medical staff that do post-mortem things and so on. And they asked one of our guides, how can you work here every day? And he looked at them and he asked them the same question. How can you do your job every day? You simply find a way to adapt and to get used to it, to make your job in the best way you can. However, it's not the wall that is solid. It always leaks. And there are these emotions that gets you. And it changes in different moments in your life. For example, when I became a father, and you can talk about to many of our staff, when they become parents, the story of Auschwitz starts resonated completely differently. Because then you can analyze the emotions that you didn't know, and then you can think about the fate of parents and children in the reality of Auschwitz. And for example, many of our conservators said that, of course, they try to concentrate on technical aspects. These are not objects of victims, but this is leather, textile, paper, wood that they need to preserve. But many of our conservators, when they held in their hands a child's shoe of a child murdered in Auschwitz, this is, that breaks this professional barrier. So this is a challenging place to work, but there is a saying at the memorial that if you start working there, you either leave very quickly or you will stay your whole life. So since it's coming to my 15 years, well, we'll see what happens, but you have to find your own mission, your own meaning, not to get rejected by this story, because it is really difficult.
Question about younger people, because if we look around, nobody here brought children, because it's a very, very heavy topic. And I have a 10-year-old, and I wonder, how would you speak to children that age?
So I do not have that experience, and we do not have that experience because in the education system in Poland, this part of history comes later. However, we can look at how my colleagues in Israel are dealing with this, because in Israel, the Holocaust education starts from the kindergarten, because it is part of the environment of the state. There is a siren at Yom HaShoah, and the whole country stops, and your children will ask, why is there a siren? What happens? Why we commemorate? So they establish, and this is a very interesting system of age-appropriate Holocaust education. And they start with a story. So when you are, you have children in kindergarten, they, for example, learn about one person who survived. So just a survival story of one person, one family, something that the person can, and then the circles got wider. Then you talk about maybe a community. Then you introduce people who lost their lives when people are older, and then only at the high school and university level you really start learning the story of all the facts and figures and challenges. So I would say for us, for the memorial, we do not recommend a visit below 13. Because it can be very traumatizing. It's very challenging not to traumatize your kids. So I would, for example, going to this exhibition may be difficult for a 10-year-old, but again, you as a parent can choose things. We at the memorial have a special team of guides who are trained to work with younger audiences. Younger for us, it's 13, 14, 15, because there are some schools that want to come with them. And we give them a different kind of tour that is, again, age appropriate, that they will not see all the places, they will not hear all the stories, they will not see the human hair, because we know that it may be too difficult for this age group. And even if the teachers say, no, my students are great and they are mature enough to see that, we say, no, you'll have to come back when they are older, because there is this challenge. So from my experience, and again, I have a different challenge because most of my bookshelves at home are books related to the topic, and my older son is reading, and there's Auschwitz, Holocaust and things. I decided to respond to questions. I'm not going to take him to the memorial when he's, 12, 13, 14, he's 10 years old right now, and I will give them the full tour. I'm waiting for questions. Right now, it's enough for them that they know that I work at Auschwitz, they know it was a terrible place, he knows it was a terrible place, and that people were murdered there. And he stopped asking questions at that point, and I'm waiting for more. And then I'll respond. So it is challenging, but there are families who bring their kids, because we cannot say to people, okay, your son will not enter if they're individual visitors. And so we tell, but this is your responsibility. At what point you will feel that it is too difficult. So it is challenging. And there are many books of survivors who will tell the story of rescue, the more positive story, not go into the darkness of extermination camps. And maybe starting from this is a good idea to tell that there was war, that people suffered, that a family suffered, but someone survived, not to start with those, from the lecture on extermination camps. Going from something that people can understand, a 10-year-old can relate to another 10-year-old. And this will be maybe a sad story because of the war, and then the older they get, the more you can get. I think that this is, and you can go to Yad Vashem website, and that they have many educational material which is age appropriate, and you can find age groups for materials and different readings that you can use.
One more question. One more question.
Well, I'm just curious a little about your own engagement in this. How did it start?
So it's not the topic of today's presentation, but since you asked, my story in a nutshell, because we have very limited time. I'm related to the city of Auschwitz, to the town where the memorial is created, because after the war, my grandparents moved there. They were searching for jobs, and it happened that they started living in Auschwitz in late 1940s, early 1950s. And so my parents met in the town of Auschwitz. My sister was born there, then my parents moved out near Warsaw, and I was born near Warsaw. But Auschwitz for me, since I was a little kid, was a place of my summer holidays. My grandparents, my cousins, the river. The memorial was there, but it didn't have so much significance historically. What was interesting for me when I was 9, 10, and that was the end of the communism in Poland, of a very gray world. And there was this strange place where you could hear foreign languages, when you had people coming in different colors, and that was. And then I started understanding why they come here, what is this place, and I got interested. There are, some people are interested in cars, some young people are interested in, I don't know. And I got interested in history. I was like a little history buff in end of primary school and high school, and I started reading more and more about Auschwitz, about the Holocaust, and then my major was I'm a journalist. I'm a professional journalist. I spent most of my life in radio. But also at university, I started working with a postgraduate journalist course that brought their students to the Auschwitz Memorial. And they were searching for someone who to coordinate this workshops, and there was I, somehow linked with local situation, but also knew something about it. So I started working with them, and this is how me and the institution met. As a Polish radio journalist, I started making a cycle of feature documentaries using the audio archives of the Auschwitz Memorial. And I'm very proud to say I'm the first journalist in the world that started using the sounds of testimonies and broadcasted them on radio as stories. And I started translating some things for the memorial because they met me. And 16 years ago, when the newly appointed director, who is still a director of the memorial, thought about creation of a press office at the institution, my name came up. Oh, there is this strange journalist from Warsaw that comes to the memorial every month, does these programs and does many things. And they offered me a job. And if you asked me 17 years ago, when I was a journalist in Polish radio, heading my morning programs about jazz culture, also about history and many things, and tell me whether I will leave my job and move to the town of Oświęcim, I would say, what for? But then life throws you a challenge, a ball, and then it happened, and I was offered a job, and there I am, almost 15 years. But it's in a nutshell. It's it seems right now that everything kind of led to this, but it's much more complicated than that. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.